Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. You amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. Welcome to Thursday. That's it, baby. It's Thursday, and you are looking absolutely amazing. We're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes, as this is for the naysayers, those who, when you talk about things like corruption and things being, how can I say, tampered with to favour certain results, some people will just not have it. They won't have it. I'm telling you, they don't believe it, and they don't want to know about it. And it's very easy for people to say that, especially when they have no skin in the game. We talk about this often. What does having skin in the game mean? It means that it's very easy for someone who is absolutely not affected in any way, shape, or form over the outcome of a crime, say. Whether Bryan Kohberger gets accused, found guilty, found innocent, whatever, found guilty, executed, it makes no difference to them. And the way in which we reach that as well, it plays no part in the lives of those who are following it. So it doesn't affect them in any way. So they have no skin in the game. If you have skin in the game, I would imagine that you would want things to be done properly. If your relative or yourself was being accused of doing a crime, of any kind of crime, really, let alone a crime of this magnitude, I would think that it would be at that point then, when you do have skin in the game, that you'd probably have a concern if you felt that things weren't being done properly. So do things get done properly all the time? Does evidence get tampered with? Does evidence get planted? Fuck yeah. Whether you want to hear it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, it does. And I'm going to show you a little video. I'm not going to play the entire video, because I think if you want to go and watch this, it should be credited to the guy who's done this video, which is this one here. This is the channel Business Reform, and this video is from 2 years ago, and it's hugely underwatched. And I want all of you, the link to this will be in the description of this video, and I will also pin it in the pinned comment down below. So head over there, go watch this video, show it some love, and get it so people can see it, because obviously the only way that videos get seen is if people watch the videos, watch as much of them as you physically can, more than half the fucking video at least, and like the video and share it if you can. It helps to push out the information, and this is something that is extremely important. And this guy also goes on to do other videos in the similar sort of series, where he is talking about certain elements of the criminal world, and how things are not as they absolutely should be. But this one in particular here, it talks about crime lab scandals, and when evidence has been tampered with at a huge scale, and the ramifications of these issues. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of cases. We're talking about cases where people are being executed on data, on evidence that simply was tampered with, faked, forged, fugazied. When you know, you know. But I'm going to play this segment of it. And again, just go and show some love and go and watch this. It's 9 minutes long, this video. If I play a couple of minutes, you'll get the gist of what we're talking about here.
Lab. On July 8, 2013, the Texas Observer reported on the case of Jonathan Salvador, who had worked at the Houston Forensics Lab from 2006 through 2013. When he was caught falsifying results of drug tests. He had handled evidence from nearly 5,000 criminal cases.
5,000, let that sink in. 5,000 criminal cases. This is one person. This is one person. And this guy will go on to give you, I think it's 3 different settings where people have been caught tampering with evidence. And it equates to in excess, I believe, of 40,000 cases.
Across 36 Texas counties. An appeals court ruled that all evidence that had ever passed through Salvador's custody was unreliable, and anyone convicted based on the corrupted evidence would have their convictions overturned unless there was enough untainted evidence against them to be retested. You might think 1,500 tainted cases in Oregon and 5,000 tainted cases in Texas are bad.
So 20,000 cases just in those two places alone. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. And when we talk about the Idaho 4 case and Bryan Kohberger's situation and the fact that we have this DNA, I was talking in comments. Let me just come back up and then we'll come back to this. I was talking in comments yesterday, and someone clearly he's there. They are on the realms of being an anti-burger, you know what I mean, a guilter. And they came at me and kind of said, why do you talk like Bryan Kohberger? And it's not about talking about Bryan Kohberger like I know Bryan Kohberger. It's talking about the case, because when you truly step back and strip everything down and really focus on what the state has, what do they have? We have a picture of a car, clips from video of this car moving around the estate, that there's gaps in it, that they're using reflections and lights to kind of fill in the gaps. The car itself, you can't tell whether that's Bryan Kohberger's car or not. And originally, the FBI agent who looked at that car deemed it to be a different one. Yes, he did indeed open up the scope of the year of the manufacture of that car, because I'm sure that they saw something or whatever. But even he couldn't 100% turn around and say that car is 100% a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra belonging to that guy, Bryan Kohberger. It can't be done. It hasn't been done. And unless there is a clearer picture showing everything, showing all of the little things that it would need to be in order to absolutely be able to say, yeah, that's his, then that is not enough evidence to kill someone. And then what else is there? We look at phone data. There's no phone data that places Bryan Kohberger at the scene of the crime. There simply isn't. However much anybody wants to say that he was at the crime scene, there is no evidence of that. There is no evidence of that via phone data. Now, the prosecution would lead to believe that there is no evidence of it because the phone was switched off, and that they can prove that. Well, I'd like to see how they can prove that his phone was physically switched off, because it doesn't seem to be, from what I can make out, the technology to 100% say that. And when you think that this area, they did a 3,800 phone pull dragnet from the tower dumps, and then they start acting all fucking, I would bet, again, my bollocks to a barn dance, that Bryan Kohberger was included in that. And their own statements within the PCA would allude to that fact, stating that he was it was located elsewhere, or in the realms of a tower that was servicing the building. There is no evidence that we didn't actually say that he was at the property. Do you know what I mean? There's the absence of evidence isn't evidence. I suppose that's what I'm getting at. We can go all complex and look into the verbiage that's used and try and determine whether we think that Payne knows what phone data is, or whether he doesn't, or whether he knows what certain phone data is, but more complex phone data he needs assistance with. We can go through all that, but the reality is there is nothing in terms of phone data that places Bryan Kohberger at the scene of the crime, and the lack of evidence isn't evidence in itself, which then takes you to the DNA. And the issue that you have with the DNA is that it goes through various different places, and none of these give a result of the DNA being Bryan Kohberger's. Lo and behold, the FBI steps in, they take it away, but then they come back and just give Bryan Kohberger's name. But there is no work, there is no evidence that supports that they did actual work that concluded that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was on the knife sheath. And in fact, you have people around this case who have flat out said that the FBI didn't say that the DNA on the knife sheath was Bryan Kohberger's. They flat out didn't say that. The FBI didn't conclude that. It wasn't concluded. They gave Bryan Kohberger's name, and I imagine, again, I'm guessing, that it was likely because Bryan Kohberger was on the radar for the Dana Smithers case. And lo and behold, when they done the dragnet and likely found Bryan Kohberger's phone in a different area, then everything starts to fall apart. And that's when things then start being hidden and start attempting to block things. And then you have situations like this, where you have data that goes through labs that they then have to try and bolster to make it look like this is how we got Bryan Kohberger. There's the vast majority of people who are a guilter believe that Bryan Kohberger's guilty because they believe that there was DNA found at the scene of the crime. That's just a fact. That's just where we are. But let's just listen to the last section of this. If I actually swap the screen over. I was going to start playing it. You wouldn't have heard a thing, would you? Let's go.
Comes to crime lab scandals, Massachusetts said, hold my beer. Massachusetts had not just one, but two back-to-back major scandals involving their crime labs. In 2012, Annie Ducan was working in the Hinton Crime Lab in Massachusetts, where she had worked for nearly a decade. She was caught and admitted to tampering with evidence, forging test results, and then lying about it. In 2013, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison and was released in 2016.
So literally done prison time for about how many cases? How many cases are we looking at?
More than 21,000 cases she worked on have been dismissed. However, just months after Annie Ducan was sentenced, another Massachusetts State Crime Lab technician, Sonia Farrick, was caught stealing drugs from evidence and even stealing drug reference samples, which means that she has corrupted tests performed by other people in the lab, because when they are comparing an unknown substance to a real drug, that real drug had been tampered with. She pleaded guilty in 2014 to tampering with evidence and drug theft and was sentenced to 18 months in jail. More than 16,000 cases she worked on have been dismissed.
So you look at those, when you look at those numbers, you're literally looking at thousands and thousands and thousands. And you look at these two people who one gets 2 years or whatever, or 3 years, the other one gets 18 months. But think about the time, think about the prison time that has been handed out to individuals based on their malfeasance. It's unfathomable. You are looking at thousands upon thousands, 40,000 plus cases where lab technicians are falsifying evidence, falsifying results in order to get a result for ultimately law enforcement and prosecution. They're doing it for that reason. There's no other reason to do it. These labs who are generating results are doing it for the purpose of giving a false representation of the results in order to acquire a prosecution of the accused. And again, across all of these cases, and these are just the ones we know about in these areas. So are you telling me it's beyond the realms of possibility that this small little place, Moscow, Idaho, in the arse end of the back of beyond, this student-heavy hub, if you like, around the University of Idaho, they have this huge, huge crime happen that puts their entire way of life at risk? It could affect the university, the intake at the university, ultimately having an impact on the businesses of the area that depend heavily upon the influx of students through that university. And then on top of that, the $750 million acquisition of Phoenix University that could have also suffered huge ramifications due to this crime. You don't think that there would have been pressure being placed on certain areas of this crime and the workings of it that could have resulted in someone somewhere doing something that they shouldn't do? Is it really that far beyond the realms of possibility? And you have Bryan Kohberger at the heart of it being accused, who just happens to be an outsider, someone outside of the University of Idaho, Moscow, Idaho itself, no connections there. Lucky, wasn't it? Because again, it snaps, it breaks away from any kind of ramifications locally that has to then be looked into. But we'll go more into that in my next video. Well, probably either later on today or tomorrow morning, when we look at why Bryan. A lot of you have asked, why would they frame Bryan? coming soon. Love you all. Mwah.